I think that just as we're living in a nuclear age, we have grown so tremendously in scientific knowledge. It doesn't seem too much to say that men can begin to awaken to the fact that they haven't grown enough spiritually and haven't recognized their spiritual capacities.
Once something like eating is death, then you've struck at the very heart of life. The enemy of the older radical theories may have been the ruling class, but today the stakes of whether we will reform ourselves into a new kind of human being, a new kind of society, whether we will find selves worth being, the stakes of it are simply life.
So I'm still on Jerzy Kosinski's Being There, a novel written in the 1970s that is more or less a political satire. And we left off last time with Chance, the gardener, being told that for the first time in his life that he can remember, he's going to have to leave his garden and the room that he has lived in his entire life. And he's going to have to go out into the world. And it's a world that he knows exists, but he really only knows it exists through TV. And up to this point, we've gotten a picture of Chance's life that's very sedate. It is passive for the most part, except for in the garden where he tends to everything, right, by himself. And it's very, very tranquil and peaceful. Everything is beautiful because he's taking care of it all the time. And the only other place he really goes, for the most part, is his bedroom, which has a TV. And the maid even has brought him his food all these years. And so he really hasn't even ventured into the rest of the house very much, except for on this occasion when the old man who owns the house has died. And he's been told by the lawyers that since they can't identify who he was, and since he apparently doesn't have any claim on the estate, that he's got to leave. And so in chapter 3, we get Chance emerging from the garden. This has got to be a sort of reference to the emergence of mankind from the Garden of Eden in a way, just as Adam and Eve had to pack up their bags and leave after sinning. In Chance's case, there hasn't been a sin on his part. He seems to be entirely innocent, just doesn't have any sort of, vice at all. He's just a very simple man, doesn't know very much, just what he sees on TV. And he emerges from this tranquil situation and he seems to be pretty conscious of what's going on, which is interesting because in some ways he's extremely simple, but we still don't know just how much. And part of his simplicity is surely just the situation that he's been in all these years. But he understands that he has to go, and he packs up, and he's got his, quote, large, heavy leather suitcase. And that's important because all the accoutrements that he has, his suit, his hat, his, in this case, suitcase, it all factors into what happens pretty soon. Anyway, he's about ready to leave when he thinks about delaying a little bit and going into the garden and maybe even hiding there where he may be able to stay for a while. Because he loves it so much, he does that. And he says, Jerzy Kosinski says, for some time he stood in the garden looking around lazily in the morning sun. Then he disconnected the sprinkler and walked back to his room. He turned on the TV, sat down on the bed, and flicked the channel several times. And then he turns off the TV. He sees these images before he turns them off of skyscrapers and country houses. And then when he turns the screen off, Kosinski describes this little blue dot that happens. So this was an old tube TV. And once it was completely off, then it was just like stone, like it was lifeless. That just kind of tells you just how profoundly affected Chance has been by the television, which is really the most interaction he gets. And this is where, we begin to think about the theme of technology in this book, the fact that Chance is a creature of media. He's a creature of television in particular, because really almost all of his information of the world has come from there. So then he realizes, well, he's got to go. So he finds the old key. He goes through the gate, sticks it in the lock, and leaves. And now he's outside the gate. He's beyond Eden. And I think that this, even though he is innocent, this represents a fall. He's going into a world that is going to be far less simple and less beautiful in a way, but more free than he's ever experienced before. So he's outside the gate. The sunlight dazzles his eyes and he's surprised. And it doesn't take long before something bad happens to him. He's trying to walk, and it says he has found a narrow space between the cars parked against the curb, and he's turning to leave the sidewalk. And suddenly he saw a car rapidly backing towards him. He attempted to leap out past the car's rear bumper, but the suitcase slowed him down. He jumped, but too late. He was struck and jammed against the headlights of the stationary car behind him. Chance barely managed to raise one knee. He could not raise the other leg. He felt a piercing pain and cried out, hammering against the trunk of the moving vehicle with his fist. So now some of the pieces of the puzzle start coming together, because at this point, a chauffeur leaps out of the limo that has hit Chance and tries to help him. And then after that, then the passenger in the limo gets out, and it's a woman. And Kosinski writes, Chance looked up at her. He had seen many women who looked like her on TV. It's only my leg, he said, but his voice was trembling. I think it was crushed a bit. Oh, dear God, the woman said hoarsely. Would you please raise your trouser leg so I can take a look? And so then, she sees that it looks pretty bad. She hopes it's not broken. And, she's probably calculating in her head, oh my gosh, this man looks important. He's got a fancy suit on and hat. Of course, she's wealthy. She's riding in a limo. And she's maybe thinking, oh, I don't want a lawsuit. Let's, what can I do here? She says to him, my husband's been very ill. We have his doctor and several nurses staying with us. The best thing I think would be to take you right home, unless, of course, you'd prefer to consult your own physician. So there she's speaking to him like a fellow wealthy person. This is what she thinks she has because of his appearance. And so we also get a glimpse into her life. Her husband's very ill, medical staff, so she has a lot of money indeed. And she introduces herself as Mrs. Benjamin Rand, also called E.E. by her friends, Elizabeth Eve, and Chance learns E.E. And then Chance, this is a quote from the novel, Chance recalled that in similar situations, men on TV introduced themselves. I am Chance, he stuttered. And then, when this didn't seem to be enough, added, the gardener. Chauncey Gardiner, she repeated. Chance noticed that she had changed his name. He assumed that, as on TV, he must use his new name from now on. She says, my husband and I are very old friends of Basil and Perdita Gardiner. Are you by any chance a relative of theirs, Mr. Gardiner? No, I am not, Chance replied. Would you care for a little whiskey or perhaps a little cognac? Yes, and he accepts them. But he's never done that before. Okay, so notice a couple of things here. Again, this lady assumes many things based on where Chauncey is, okay, what he looks like, and what he's carrying. And she even hears a different name than the name he gave her. And this is very important to remember. It is a political truism that people see what they want to see and they hear what they want to hear. And the human brain can actually change substantially what is seen and heard based on its expectations. We know this, and yet we never remember it. Okay. So that's what's happening here. And because he's perceived to be in the same class, she feels safe to bring him into her home, and she thinks that might help save her from a lawsuit, perhaps, and other difficulties. And, you know, if let's imagine that Chance had been a bedraggled looking homeless individual, okay? Maybe she would have had a different reaction, right? We don't know. She seems like a nice enough person, but maybe she would have a different reaction. All of these things combine to make her think that she's hit a very important person, and she's acting accordingly. And he is acting according to what he thinks is the norm, which is that things change very fast and people use new names. Actors may play various different roles. And so now his name is Chauncey Gardiner. So he doesn't try to correct her. He gets into her limo, and very fancy for the time. It has a small TV screen in it. And so he asks to have it turned on. When they get to the mansion, and Chance has passed out for a little while, but has woken up in bed, and the doctor is there. And this is also very important. He says, "Your victim is very handsome," speaking to EE, "but now I'll have to examine him, and I'm sure you will prefer to leave us alone." So now we know for sure what we suspected, which is that Chauncey Gardiner is very handsome. It looks like Chance got lucky because his leg isn't broken. So he's just got a big contusion. But he's basically there to stay for a while. And they take care of him and make sure he gets pain relievers. They're going to take an x-ray. He's giving him fluids. And so, you know, it's like being in a hospital. And he's about ready to fall asleep when EE comes back into the room. And this is a quote from Kosinski. "When one was addressed and viewed by others, one was safe." This is Chance in his thinking in his head. When one was addressed and viewed by others, one was safe. Whatever one did would then be interpreted by the others in the same way that one interpreted what they did. They could never know more about one than one knew about them. This is what he thinks because he doesn't have a strong grasp of human relations, just TV interaction. Okay. And he says, "Mrs. Rand, I almost fell asleep." "I am sorry if I disturbed you," she said, "but I've just been speaking to the doctor and he tells me that all you need is rest. So now, Mr. Gardiner," she sat on a chair next to his bed, "I must tell you how very guilty I am and how responsible I feel for your accident. I do hope it will not inconvenience you too much." So she's still extremely polite. She's still likely worried that he's going to be angry. Okay. But he says, "Please don't worry. I'm very grateful for your help. I wouldn't." And she says, "It was the least we could do. Now, is there anyone you would like to notify? Your wife, your family?" And he says, "I have no wife, no family." "Perhaps your business associates?" Please do feel free to use the telephone or send a cable or use our telex. Would you like a secretary? My husband has been ill for so long that at present his staff has very little to do. No, thank you. There isn't anything that I need. Surely there must be someone you would like to contact. There is no one. Mr. Gardiner, if this is so, and please don't think that what I say is mere politeness, if you have no particular business to attend to right away, I would like you to stay here with us until your injury has completely healed. It would be dreadful for you to have to look at after yourself in such a state. And I hope you won't refuse, okay? And he accepts the invitation because of course he does, okay? Like what he's just going along with the plot, plus he has nowhere else to go. And he is just telling the bald-faced truth, which is that he has absolutely no one. But on the other end of that communication is not somebody who sees only what he is saying and how he presents himself, but she's reading in all sorts of things that Chance doesn't read into others because he has that stunted emotional and social life. And so, you know, she's thinking probably not only is he rich and he might cause me trouble, but also he's handsome. And if he doesn't have anything to do in the meantime, having this really quite handsome man coming back to health in another room when my sick husband over here is just not probably able to interact with her very much, that's probably pretty exciting, although she might not admit it to herself. And now Chance has a great situation in a way. He's got a nice room with a television set, and he's got maids and nurses. The maid brings him his food, much as he always had it brought in the past. Later, E.E. enters again and tells him that Mr. Rand is much older than she, well into his 70s, and until recently, he had been a vigorous man, but no more. Now, as E.E. tries to converse with Chance, quote, Chance resorted to repeating parts of her own sentences, a practice he had observed on TV. In this fashion, he encouraged her to continue and elaborate. Each time Chance repeated E.E.'s words, she brightened and looked more confident. In fact, she became so at ease that she began to punctuate her speech by touching now his shoulder, now his arm. So she's becoming attracted to him. And part of her attraction is now, in addition to how wealthy and handsome he is that he's like the perfect social partner for a person in a stunted universe, in a person that herself is probably too mediated, too like affected by media, and maybe just not having enough human interaction, or just maybe she suffers from like a gigantic ego. But a lot of people do love to just have what they say repeated back to them, and they do not notice, and indeed they like you more, okay? And so the fact that he's really not saying anything new or adding anything to the conversation does not bother E. And as a matter of fact, she likes it. And pretty soon she's warming up to him without realizing she still doesn't know anything about him. Okay. And if we back off from the romantic angle, we're seeing the dynamics that can be involved in an attraction to any, figure, political figure, artistic figure, celebrity. You may know nothing about them, and they may say very little of any substance whatsoever. But if they're sort of validating your words or your preconceived opinions, then you like them. And you can even make that happen on your own. If what they say is innocuous and empty enough, empty of all like actual content, then you can inject your own meaning into what they say. And I think that Kosinski is telling us This dynamic is at work in television, in media, right? In American media. This dynamic is at work where material is put out into the world that is, it's very innocuous and interpretable, or devoid of content or real meaning, but interpretable. And people inject what they think into it, right? So that the politician, for instance, becomes a cipher, and is kind of like a node of attention and meaning for other people, while perhaps being devoid of permanent meaning, him or herself. And Chance is liking his situation quite a bit. Kosinski writes, Chance wondered whether Mr. Rand would ask him to leave the house. The thought that he might have to leave did not upset him. He knew that he would eventually have to go, but that, as on TV, what would follow next was hidden. He knew the actors on the new program were unknown. He did not have to be afraid, for everything had its sequel, and the best that he could do was to wait patiently for his own forthcoming appearance. So we get a better grasp of Chance's internal life here. Literally, he's learned the TV script really well, and he's thinking that life is television, and that, while he may not know what's going to happen next, something's going to happen next, and he just has to kind of follow along with that role. Okay. But he is liking this situation, and who wouldn't? Okay. We don't know if EE looks pretty good, but I'm sure, given the description of younger than in the 70s and wealthy, she's done her very best to continue to look good. She was played by Shirley MacLaine in the novel, and they made a good-looking pair. Later on that evening, EE invites Chance down for a drink, and her husband's going to be there. He is frail and elderly, but he's at least there. Kosinski says, in deciding how to behave, Chance chose the TV program of a young businessman who often dined with his boss and the boss's daughter. You look like a healthy man, Mr. Gardiner, said Mr. Rand. That's your good luck, but doesn't this accident prevent you from attending to your business? As I have already told Mrs. Rand, Chance said slowly, my house has been closed up, and I do not have any urgent business. I was just expecting something to happen when I had the accident. You see how, okay, my house has closed up. Are you going to interpret that as somebody literally like shut the house on him and wouldn't let him back in? Or, given everything that's happened and how he appears to be, would you not think he's talking about his business there, and that, he's just waiting for, his next shot, his next entrepreneurial project to take off? Okay. So they're looking at him, and Chance says further, it is not easy, sir, to obtain a suitable place, a garden, in which one can work without interference and grow with the seasons. There can't be too many opportunities left anymore. On TV, he faltered. It dawned on him. I've never seen a garden. I've seen forests and jungles and sometimes a tree or two, but a garden in which I can work and watch the things I've planted in it grow? And he felt sad. And Mr. Rand says, very well put, Mr. Gardiner. I hope you don't mind if I call you Chauncey, a gardener. Isn't that the perfect description of what a real businessman is? A person who makes a flinty soil productive with the labor of his own hands, who waters it with the sweat of his own brow, and who creates a place of value for his family and for his community. Yes, Chauncey, what an excellent metaphor. A productive businessman is indeed a laborer in his own vineyard. There you go. Now, Mr. Rand, wealthy businessman, has projected on Chauncey Gardiner, wealthy businessman, visionary. And when Chauncey or Chance speaks in very simple terms, Mr. Rand can't see what's in front of him. No, he sees a visionary businessman. And at one point, Chance mentions, the room upstairs, and Rand says, "You're young. Why do you have to talk about the room upstairs? That's where I'm going soon, not you. You could almost be my son. You're so young. You and E, both of you so young." So my gosh, you get the setup to like, wow, when I die, maybe you and E could get together here. You're suitable for my wife. And so, Rand tries to prod him a little further, but he can't get too much more information about him. He gets told that he doesn't have a family again. Rand interprets to that as, oh my gosh, you really are alone. Um, and so Rand says to him, "There's something about you that I like. It's that he's a cipher and tells you, you hear what you want to hear from him." But anyway, Rand says, "I'm an old man and I can speak to you frankly. You're direct. You grasp things quickly and you state them plainly. As you may be aware," Rand continued, "I am chairman of the board of First American Financial Corporation. We have just begun a program to assist American businesses that have been harassed by inflation, excessive taxation, riots, and other indecencies. We want to offer the decent gardeners of the business community a helping hand, so to speak. After all, they are our strongest defense against the conglomerates and the pollutants who so threaten our basic freedoms and the well-being of our middle class. We must discuss this at greater length, perhaps, when you are up and around. You can meet some of the other members of the board who will acquaint you further with our projects and our goals." So yeah, this is now he's projecting, he's coming on with an awful lot of ideology here. He's fiscally conservative, he's very pro-business. He thinks that there are pollutants out there, and I don't think he means like environmental pollutants. I think he means like threats to business from leftists and I don't know what else, regulators perhaps. And Rand says, I know you are not a man to act on the spur of the moment, but do think about what I've said and remember that I'm very ill and don't know how much longer I'm going to be around." And so it's almost like right from the off the bat here, Chance has impressed Mr. Rand so much that he's actually alluding to the idea that he could set him up in a new business and help him get back into like entrepreneurial good health and have his wife after he dies. So you can see that it's quite funny, but that there's a lot of like truths hidden in this book. So next time we'll move on to chapter 4, where we'll find out what happens to Chance next, now that he's been positioned in this very promising and lucrative situation that he does not at all understand. I'll see you next time.